Hmm.
And so, like in my experience, I mean, we're both emotional authority, so it's that's a pretty big one in the similarity. And when it comes to emotional authority, what I've realized more and more in my space is, I mean, anything that carries any sort of charge within my body, there's something about it that's it's too soon, you know. It's too much. There's something up with what's going on, and if I'm trying to act on that or act in the way of which I think I need to act, even though the body is still really charged about it, or even very subtly charged, I know that there's something up there, you know.
Yeah.
And usually when that's happening, both of us have the open head centers, right? So those that the head gets really open. Like you start thinking about a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, start questioning things, overthinking. Like it just you go into like these rabbit holes that just don't like that. It doesn't even. It's not helpful at all. There's no use for it, really. You
Hmm.
know. So anytime that's happening, like in my experience, that's what I realized. Anytime there's a charge in the body, and then also when that's happening, it's generally the mind is getting really active. It's getting really excited about something. It's trying to figure something out, but it's not the mind isn't meant to figure out the majority of things, if not anything.
Hmm.
The body is going to know. And so if the body isn't feeling clear, like you're not feeling that like ease in your decision making and in the decision you're going to make, then it's just more time to wait.
Okay.
Pretty much it.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, what have you been exploring, like human design and like just the different elements? I'm sure you have questions, but yeah,
I do
whatever's coming.
have questions.
Okay.
So basically, well, first of all, what made me message you is because um, there was this situation at the gym where there was this girl doing these exercises, and I really wanted to go help her and show her a better way to like, target her muscles. And then I was just fighting within, and I was like, no, don't go. She's not inviting you. She like, you know, and that was just a lot because like I knew I could see she needed help and I could help, and I was like, I got this, but like I didn't do it. And so basically for me it's really frustrating to have to wait. um it's so frustrating. Sometimes it even feels like my feminine energy within is like so feels so restricted, and she just like wants to like light shit on fire, like not really, but like she's just like not about it. And so yeah.
Okay. So, well, initially, what I'll say is that you've probably gone through enough situations in your experience where you have given that unsolicited advice or shared something and then got hit with, the backlash, right?
Hmm.
But, what I'll say is that sometimes you're going to continue to have to kind of face that to continue to get the lesson, right? So the experimentation is always going to be where you're going to explore that like most profoundly. But
Yeah.
what I'll say is, it's like you've already experienced that, so you do already know what it feels like when you do go uninvited. So it's important to then recognize like when the mind is then trying to convince you otherwise, right? Where
Mhm.
like it's like you already know that, but then the mind's like, well, maybe this time would be different, or maybe maybe she's inviting you in some way, or like when you start to see the mind starting to really like either justify, rationalize, or ask too many questions, you just know it's just not
It's
it's
not
not
it.
it. It's not
Okay.
it. The mind, that's the not self, that's the conditioning, right?
Okay.
So especially because you have those two open head centers, so that's important.
Yeah. Okay.
um that's the first thing. Then the second thing is, so I was just going through that email I sent you. Even me, like doing stuff with projectors, I reread that email I sent you because it's so accurate in so much of what I've experienced with projectors. And
Mhm.
the first piece being like this one piece here where it says, invitation comes from silence. Your aura will pull people to you only if you are quiet. So the quiet element is just as much the vocal quietness as it is the inner quietness. So two things. For the three energy, you're only going to learn through the experimentation. That's going to be important. So it doesn't really matter so much of like even what I tell you. Even when you get into the mode of like over planning, that could be like writing out like a plan of something, or like over planning in the mind. both of those things don't really go well for the three energy because it doesn't really matter how much of that you do, you're still going to have to explore it, right? You're still going to have to experiment, and then through that experimentation face the lesson, from that trial. That's the three. The three only learns through the material process. It doesn't learn through like necessarily being taught, like told something or reading a bunch of stuff. Like you're gonna have to put it into practice in some form, right? So that's one side. Now, when it comes to the going back to that silence piece, when I'm in the aura of a projector that I feel that I really respect, it's usually when they're not opening their mouth too much. Like, it's usually when they're not, like, trying to, like, constantly prove themselves to me or, show how much knowledge they have or, like, just initiate a bunch of things with me, like, that when that's not happening for a projector, I naturally am pulled to them. Like, I naturally want to ask them, like, "What's your feel?" Like, "What are you seeing about this?" Or just even just being with them, just talking to them, it's really pleasant. I really enjoy it.
Okay.
Um, but when I'm with a projector who's really trying to initiate things with me, coming to me first, giving advice or giving some perspective on something, it's just like, man, like it just doesn't work, you know what I mean? So again, there has to be a certain so that when I was driving home today and I was just thinking about you in this call, I forget the exact wording of what came into my intuition when I was thinking about you, but it was mainly like, um, it was along the lines of really like, loving your essence and loving your own presence, whatever that means to you. It's like really learning to. The reason why I'm saying this is because it's relating to the essence of trust. Like the trusting in yourself, the trusting that your energy, your presence, your essence will be felt, and it will be felt stronger when you're not trying to present it. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
So that goes back to the whole silence piece is the more silence you're cultivating within through just going through your own process, like, okay, you're at the gym and you want to give advice on this exercise, but you're not invited. So it's like, well, why not just continue with your workout, do the exercises yourself, and then maybe there's a chance that woman or that person will either just notice what you're doing and change it or come to you and then ask you at a certain point. That could be even like months down the road after being the gym for a little while.
Okay.
um, who knows what that timeline is, but it's not for you to decide that. That's what's important.
Okay.
And that's where like the controlling comes in, right? It's like
Yeah.
you get in this because when I feel into you, just knowing you for this time, it's like you have this beautiful, like, innocent essence and this femininity that naturally expresses from you. So every time or anytime you get in that mode where you're like wanting to like control or you're trying to like I can like feel the frustration.
Mm-hmm.
I can just imagine, like, how that then influences your reality, like, how that will ripple, and that rippling then doesn't matter what you come with your advice, you're just gonna be, like, smacked?
Yeah.
So, it's that controlling, it's that masculine, like, energy that wants to, like, just manipulate and,
Yeah.
like, get.
It's like the doing, whereas I just need to be.
Literally, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what I mean by loving your essence, like, the meditations that you do, like, as a simple practice of just focusing on your heart and focusing on a loving appreciation for yourself and all the aspects of your body and your being, and just reverberating in that, like a I don't know, like a charging station where you just continue to come back to this loving, observation of yourself that's silent and simple. It's not like this glamorous thing, it's just very silent, simple, and continuing to let that cultivate is is the essence of the projector. That's why with the projector, it's like when there's no clear invitations, it's just keep doing what you love. Like just do your own workout. Like, continue to meditate, like just enjoy yourself for the day. And you're gonna just naturally bring those people into your world. Or the people you're already in the world of, they're just gonna feel that more from you and then they're gonna want more of that, like they're gonna want to hear from you, they're gonna be with you, like this type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. When there is a question that comes to me that isn't mine, how do I like send that back to someone else. Like I don't want that in me, you know? Do I
Well,
just like ignore it or
yeah, it's not so much ignoring as it is as a like a silent, non-judgmental observation, you know, where you're just observing. The mind works in a way where it's like, I don't like to use the bully reference, but it kind of is like that, you know. It's like a bully will only keep going at you if you're reactive to them,
yeah.
you know. And once you're not, then there's no fuel to the fire, so it kind of like just dissolves. And in reality, like if we take that example and just look at like our our existence, our reality works in a way where a lesson continues to come as long as you have an energetic charge towards it,
Okay.
right? So if there's a person, place, or thing that when you come in contact with it, there's an energetic charge towards that, well, it's going to keep coming up because the purpose of it arising is so that you can come to a place of a neutrality with it, you know, like a contentment with it. So when you look at your chart, you know, you have all this open energy. So all of this open energy is not you. So it's important that you're continuing to cultivate that silent observation, you know, where you're coming to that place where you can just continue to just witness what's happening within you without necessarily needing to act on it.
Okay. Okay. I know this and it's much harder to do, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the practicing, you know, like I mean, the increase, I mean, I've always said it, it's kind of like what we went through before, you know, where we talked about fasting for a while, talk about it, and then finally you do it.
Hmm.
And again, like a three, doing is like exponentially greater than the talking about it, because in the doing, the three really gets to know what this is, you know. So fasting and you know, deepen times of silence and just pure meditation, these are the two like primary practices that are going to get the most like literally some of the most powerful progress that you can make on your path, but they're the things that are likely like the last thing the mind wants to do, you know.
Yeah.
It's like the thing that's going to be avoided the most. So the more you can just increase the time, and we can finish with the meditation if you like today and just kind of like sink into that. But it's just reminding yourself that the more silent time you have within yourself to again come into that loving compassion with just exactly who you are in this moment,
Hmm.
you're going to just continue to notice that reverberate, you know. And then you will be brought into those situations that, you know, you're there to share then, right?
Okay. So I felt that there was something that was contradicting itself because it says that I have to stop looking for outside validation, but yet I am asked to wait to be recognized. So, like, naturally, I would like look for outside validation to be recognized. So, like, how do I deal with, like, how do I manage that?
Well, it's kind of coming to an understanding that it's like everything has two sides of itself in a certain sense, you know. It's like we can eat food in a place of like deepened like like emotional pain and needing to find relief from our day kind of thing,
Hmm.
or we can eat a meal in a deep place of love, you know,
Okay.
like we made it and there's such reverence and all that. So when it comes to like any projector, you naturally feel better when you're recognized. We all do to a certain degree.
Hmm.
But for you, it's like there's a natural feeling of like security and like a unity in a sense with other people when they
Yeah.
recognize you, because the recognition isn't coming from a place of lack. It's coming from a place of almost like it's in a sense like a form of exchange, right? Where it's like, okay, if you have advice to give and you're talking to someone who's not listening to you, like there's no exchange happening,
Yeah.
right? But when you talk to somebody who's listening to you and they really want to hear what you have to say, and they're even on a deeper level willing to even apply with what you have to say, like etc., there's an exchange that occurs there.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So that exchange is, in essence, that's you could even call that that's a tantric process. Like that in essence is the higher form of tantric life, because it's the movement of energy, it's the pulsation of energy, right? So
Yeah.
you're giving and you're also receiving, and the other person is giving and also receiving, and then that's the exchange,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So it's like it's understanding that you can't deny the aspects of you that desire that recognition. But if the recognition is coming from a place just to relieve yourself of pain, that's just an illusionary idea of what the human experience is. Because pain
Mhm.
is inevitable, like endless in the human experience, but
Yeah.
suffering is different, So if we're constantly trying to find relief from our pain, we're gonna eventually end up in suffering because it's just we're looking to escape ourselves.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself like wanting to, I don't know, do anything, post a picture, send a message to somebody, like do any, go outside to like to see people just to like so they see you. Like if you're finding you're doing that just to escape from the pain, it's not that you can't do those things because that's also a part of the process. But if you're recognizing the intention by which you're exploring it, you're gonna catch yourself more and more and more of not jumping the gun,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So yeah.
And so when those things are done without the intention of like easing the pain, then it's okay. That's
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna feel that that's when you're gonna notice the natural invitations,
okay.
you know? Right? It's like, again, the person who doesn't want to hear from you, and you're like, I mean, it's kind of like if we get rid of human design, we just talk about like the idea of like, say we're attracted to somebody, and we want them to know, like, we want them to want us too. Then there's this like, okay, if they're not paying attention, then there's the desire more to want to like
Hmm.
get their attention. If you, then it's like if you wash away even the romantic lens, that happens everywhere, that happens all the time. If there's any place where we feel bored or we feel sad, unrecognized, this is all like the deep rooted pain, right? It's the deep rooted, in your case, bitterness, from the natural lessons you may have learned when you were a child of not being recognized or things like that. So that bitterness then keeps coming up when you feel that, but it's like, well, that doesn't mean you act on it. It means you have to be willing to feel like what that energy is, and then see, okay, as I feel through that, I'm opening up more space for true invitations to come,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
It's like we have to put, it's like the fasting thing, every hour you're pushing through a comfort zone that's opening up for more space of healing,
Yeah. Hmm.
which I'm sure you felt.
Yeah.
How have you been feeling since the fast?
I've been feeling good. Um, it's really weird. I feel like maybe 5, 6 months ago, I started feeling my organs, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
very, very, very deeply.
Mhm.
Um, and so then I was on this protocol with Mike Dawson. I'm not, yeah, and that really helped. But and then fasting also helped. But I still feel my organs, so there's still some fasting or some detoxification to be done. But yeah, I feel
Yeah,
good.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the herbs can help a lot with that. I mean, now you're getting into that, but I can send you some resources that you can explore if you like. And
Hmm.
the herbs are really helpful for the organ regeneration.
Yeah.
um I wouldn't say absolutely necessary, but like really high up there, because it's the herbs work in a way where they hold the genetic code that will help the organ reformulate itself pretty much,
Mhm.
right? So when you start using those tinctures and working with that, I mean, yeah, that's like, oof, that's a key.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know about the genetic code, so that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like almost like you're taking the tincture. It's kind of like homeopathy in a sense. Like homeopathy works in a way where it's like you're taking the essence of something that then sends the signal throughout your whole body to start like formulating itself to like towards that.
Hmm.
Like in essence, homeopathy is the original vaccine. It's like the non-intrusive vaccine,
Yeah.
because you're taking something that may be the virus, but it's in such a low quantity that, but all the body only needs that simple information,
Hmm.
right? And so the herbs work in the same way. You're taking that, and the organs then get that information, like depending on the herb corresponding to whatever organ. It's like, okay, now this is what I need to help myself regenerate back to my original DNA before we put all the food and all the toxicity in our body.
Hmm. Okay, I love
Yeah.
that.
I have
Okay.
actually a really nice, like, yeah, I'll find it. A simple picture depending what organ, um, like simple herbs that you can use, like especially it's even nicer too when you can go out and pick it, like especially this time, like before the spring, like there's a lot of milk thistle out there, um, elderberry root is out, there's a couple different ones that are really good for like liver, kidneys, and things like that.
Mhm.
And when it's from the local area, it's even better because it's holding like, the the soil of it's coming from the soil of where we are. So that's it's helpful. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
hmm
Um,
What let me ask, what organs were you feeling the most? Was there any in particular?
yeah, so my liver,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
especially the tip of it was just excruciating. Um, and my spleen, or at least what felt like my spleen, my
hmm
pancreas, and my colon, all of it that I feel, and then my gallbladder as well.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, let me see if I can find this picture because I mean, liver's gonna be the most common. Liver and spleen, 'cause liver's filtering the blood, and then pancreas is filtering like, the lymphatic. So, I mean, the spleen is filtering the lymphatic. So, like those two are generally the um most blocked up.
Mhm.
Colon, but the funny thing is colon generally has to be cleansed first usually, which you probably already felt a little bit with the fast, but um, if you increase I did a really good colon cleanse a long time ago. But the premise of it is like if you were doing a bit more of extended juicing and then you were using that pudding. Did I send you the pudding recipe?
No.
So it's like a binder. It's a mix of psyllium husk, bentonite clay, and
Oh, that
charcoal,
could. Okay, yeah, yeah,
right? So I don't know if you took any of that, but that it's not as help. I mean, even if you're eating lighter like plant-based, it'll be helpful. But when it's most helpful when you're on like some sort of liquid fast, because when you're taking that out, that's what starts to pull out the excess fecal matter, right? So when it comes to the colon, that's where a lot of it is sitting, like excess. So that using that binder, it kind of like works through your intestinal tract and helps pull out um, you know, whatever's in there.
okay, okay, cool.
So
And so
yeah,
I can take that pudding whenever I'm like fasting or juice cleansing.
it's better, but like even if you go through a phase where you're doing maybe just like salads and like plant-based style, like that'll still be good. I mean, if you're still eating like meat and heavier stuff, it's not going to be as effective. I mean, to be honest, it could always be effective, but it's going to be best when you're fasting.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, because like even when you're speaking of like obviously like womb healing work is a really profound topic in the especially like the women's new age spiritual culture and that kind of thing. Like true womb healing can't even really happen without the colon being cleansed because there's a bunch of fecal matter stuck in there that's pushing
mhm,
against the womb, right? So the space of the womb is small. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So when that colon is cleansed, then the womb actually can open, and that's where you can start to feel. Because like I have a womb too. Males have a womb too. So like when I experience like over the years of cleansing, now what I experience most of the time is this like perpetual like energy charge in my gut. Like in the qigong traditions, that's where they would activate the energy to be able to like start fires with their hands and stuff, because that was where the true like martial art energy came from, right? Which is right in the navel.
yeah,
So when your colon is cleansed and the intestinal tract is more clear, the womb opens and it almost acts as like, like the static ball,
yeah.
like, like where it's like doing all
Mhm.
that thing. That's literally like how my gut feels most of the time when I'm not like if I don't overeat or something like that,
Okay,
right? So that energy is the
it's like
seat.
purified and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the core of where all the sexual force and creative force comes from, right? So as you have that activated, then you can move that into different places, and you just feel better. It's then easier to work too. Like if you're moving it into like a business, you can actually like you're moving that energy, then cycling it through your being.
Yeah.
Um, right. So
Hmm.
yeah, but yeah, that's that's an important one. So yeah, I would focus first on the colon. The herbs for the liver and all this stuff can always be happening, But
Yeah.
the colon's important to be cleansed because if it's not cleansed and you start detoxing in deeper layers, that like toxicity can start just releasing back into your organ
Okay.
system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, so I should make sure that's cleansed before anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice. The psyllium husk and stuff will do it for the most part. You know, you take it like at night and then it'll generally come out the next day. You know, it depends. Like it takes time obviously,
Yeah.
but yeah, like for me when I did my 40 day and I did the psyllium husk, I would uh I would do it at night and then in the morning I would literally feel like I'd start getting headaches and stuff in the morning because it was in my colon ready to go. And then I would do an enema to release it. But it was like everything was so clean that like any toxicity that was left too long, even like an hour, you'd start feeling it. I'd start feeling like clogged up and like it's just really crazy.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. And I've done an enema. So it was so basically when doing the pudding thing, when it's clogged up, then I need to do an enema.
Well, it's like when you're doing a longer juice fast, there's no fiber, right? So there's nothing that's pulling out anything. So it's easier and better to do enemas when you're doing the juice cleanses. If you're still eating foods, you're still going to have the fiber pulling it out. So it's not as necessary, but like say you eat something that's like just not really feeling good, like you just kind of I don't know, you chose something that wasn't helpful or you didn't know and it just made your stomach really if I ever do that, I usually do an enema with like about an hour or so after. Sometimes it takes like one or two because the water needs to go like right up into the intestinal tract, like you need to let it really sit. Like sometimes you put the water in and do an inversion with your legs on the wall,
Yeah.
right, and then kind of like work it through, and then that'll just like help relieve that tension, like if you feel bloated or something, you know. But until you're doing like if it's a longer juice fast, then it's not as necessary because you still have fiber, right, to pull it out. So yeah.
Um, so for my open head center and open ajna, you kind
Hmm.
of mentioned it a bit earlier, um, but so it's about like basically thinking about the randomest things at the randomest times and like very just things that really don't serve me. And so I was wondering how can I use my authority and the other thing,
Strategy.
yeah, to kind of I don't know, like stop having those things or observe them differently. I'm not sure like what to do, but um it's kind of in yeah. Hmm.
Makes sense. Okay, so a couple things. Your environment is really important, right? Because you have so much open,
Yeah.
who you spend your time with, both in the physical and on social media. Social media is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't think about it, but like if we were following like 1,000 people, 10,000 people, whatever, like you're taking in that,
Okay.
you know, when you're scrolling, when you're going through stories or whatever, you're taking in that.
Okay.
So, so I would start just like auditing that, you know, like just really auditing, okay, what am I really allowing into my field? You know, like when it comes to my physical relationships and who I'm spending my time with or where I'm going. And then same with social media, like what's all the content I'm taking in, same with like music, movies. It's pretty much like your diet of consumption everywhere.
Okay.
That's going to be quite important for you to really consider, you know, just take a an hour, you know, whatever, and like write it down, go through your social media, just take a look, like really observe, like, is it really necessary for me to be following this person or reading these email subscriptions or you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that would be what I would initially recommend. And then you know what may be funny when you do that is you may notice the mind just try and justify and rationalize even more why you need to be looking at that, you know?
Okay.
Like what I've done recently, like so my Facebook got hacked and then I got disabled um and then I started looking because Instagram, I don't actually go on the newsfeed much. I only did that on Facebook. So
Okay.
because I'm not going on the newsfeed on Instagram, I'm like, well, I'm really not taking in much of anybody at all.
Mhm.
Like I don't look at much. I deleted YouTube off my phone and all that. So I'm like, so if my day goes by and I only interact with a few physical humans in my day, why is it that I on social media it's like 50 to 100 people, you know, I'm interacting on Messenger or email or you know what I mean? Why is that okay? Like I wouldn't want that in my physical life.
Mhm.
So why am I allowing it in my you know social media life? So I really just then took a step back and I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta look at this, you know. Um, and so that was really helpful because the reality is like again because of your energy in particular. For me, it'll work the same but just different. Like if that makes sense, it's like for you, it's the things that are meant to come to you are gonna come. They're gonna make their way to you in
Mhm.
whatever way that needs to happen. It's gonna make its way to you, right? So if you're clogged up with a bunch of other people's stuff and you're just like looking and consuming and just like really in that like consumption mode, you're not going to have any space to really like listen in to what's yours and what someone else's,
Okay.
right? It's going to be really like kind of crossed over. So it's really important that you're protecting that,
Yeah.
right? But like what comes with that is that's where you're going to start to really go through more of the purge and more of the cleansing in the of the not self and of those undefined centers because you're going to start to become more and more aware of where there's aspects of you that you thought were you but they're not,
Okay.
right? Or like ideas, beliefs, you know, habits and things like that that you thought were enjoyable that aren't actually enjoyable.
Okay.
Right. And I mean, this is nothing new. I know you've gone through this already for some time, but it's just going to continue to intensify because I mean, you're asking these questions and you're coming to me, you know, so it's like, well, you're obviously in that space of readiness, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's again, it's like, it's you know, part of the process of meditation and like contemplative, like true inquiry and contemplation is not a removal of thinking. It's an honest looking at thinking.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, if I go into meditation and my mind is really active, I'm not like in a judgment, like I shouldn't be thinking, I want to be silent. I don't want I'll just I'll go with every stream of those thoughts and I'll explore every single one and I'll look at it and I'll see like, okay, where is this actually taking me? Right? And what you'll tend to find, at least what I found was like the mind will go on some trend. And if you're just observing it and not resisting, it'll just go on a trend and then it'll just drop it and it'll go on another one.
Okay.
And then it'll go on another one. And it's like going through this like rabbit hole it's just like it's not doing anything. It's literally just processing likely all the stuff that I may have taken in my day. It's just like going
Okay.
down those you know what I mean, right? It's like when you go on social media for too long, you start feeling
Mhm.
it's like holy shit, I just took in like a year's worth of information in just like you know half hour of scrolling,
Yeah.
right? So it's all about just observing yourself and continuing to increase your it's not boundaries because I don't even like the whole like drawing boundaries thing for me. It's that process can be more like a leaf falling off a tree because if you feel like you have to like draw a boundary, it's because there's something about you that's also fueling that,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
th- right, so the more you're in a place of non-judgmentally observing what's happening within you, like when you go to the end of your day and you lie down and you're like, oh, I feel like all this stuff in me and all this stuff's going on, you literally just need to sit there and watch it and not do anything with it, right?
Okay.
And just allow your body and your mind to like in a sense just purify itself. It's always working in that way. Like it always wants to just get rid of its stuff. It's just when we stop that, when we want to look at all this stuff thinking it's ours. It's like no, it's literally purging, you know. And then you start to feel yourself again. You're like, oh yeah, like I'm just here. I don't need to be, you know.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense as to. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy it's making sense. It's like
Um,
when you're in nature, you know. Like how do you feel when you go like on your bike rides and stuff?
I feel really good. Yeah. Well, I actually no, at first I have to focus on the trees and then I feel really good.
Sure.
Mhm.
Right? So it's that, like, it's that initial, you know, little, and that's literally what we're speaking of, right? It's like the not self aspect of you, which is all the conditioned aspects, or, like the stuff you're taking in. It's not really that long. You got to focus on the trees for you to be able to go through it, but
Mhm.
it's so distracting and so painful at times that it's so easy not to,
Yeah.
right? So it's easier to just keep going with those thought forms, or it's easier to jump on that habit that is not helpful for you. Like, it's easier to kind of explore that, instead of, again, coming to that silence, waiting, and then waiting a little bit more, and seeing if that urge or that desire or that distracting questioning, like, if that just passes or if it legitimately stays there.
Yeah. Okay. And when it stays there, does it mean that it's mine?
Well, I would wait some more,
Oh, okay.
because it's not that it's not yours. It's that when the longer you it's like meditation works in a very simple way, in the regard that it reminds me, I'm getting the image of the person, like, that image of, like digging for gold, and then the person who stopped like a meter before.
Mhm.
If you think of that happening like infinitely, like there's no end to that, like, basically anytime the mind says like stop, or like, you almost want to just wait a little longer.
Okay.
That's kind of how I've tended to look at things, like, more and more, especially with emotional authority, and continuing to connect to that feminine receptivity, like that true receptive mode. Because the reality is, if it's meant for you, it's gonna just keep coming. It's gonna keep coming and gonna keep coming and keep coming. You won't be able to avoid it,
Mhm.
right? So the longer you wait, the better it's gonna be, because the more deeply you're gonna know that that's for you.
Okay.
Right? It's like a relationship, like this usually the slower you take it, the better,
Mhm.
right? Like, there's almost like no detriment to just taking it as slow as possible, because at some point, if the attraction or the energy is there, it's gonna just erupt anyway, so you wouldn't have been able to stop that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Yeah. Hmm. Okay. That's interesting.
it's a test, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? It's not easy, but, like, for you, one thing I just noticed, which I we didn't actually go into much in your first reading, which was, when you look at your arrows, all your arrows are pointed right. The arrows behind your head, beside your head there.
Mhm.
So this type of individual with all these pointed right, it, I mean, it's everything that I've already observed, and I feel like you've already observed about yourself, of being that one who is, like, really in the flow of life, like really in that feminine receptivity.
Mhm.
It's like when we hung out and you were just like kind of in your world. It's not just a Pisces thing. It's just, that's very much your essence. And the more in which you surrender to that essence of not necessarily needing, like, huge structure to your life, or like a gigantic plan or strategy or schedule, or like all of the things in which the world we've come to know says is like absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
um the more you're going to continue to, like, just be in love with yourself, and emanate that,
Okay.
right? Because I know someone else with this, and more and more people are getting bright arrows, because we're moving into more and more of a feminine foundation time, like a revival of the feminine essence. So, like, I have 3 pointed left, so that's made it more challenging, in some ways, easier to adapt to the old paradigm, but in the new paradigm, more and more people are gonna have them right. So, you having them all pointed right, you naturally are gonna become more and more of someone, like, representative of the essence of what it means to live, like, in the present moment, in the flow, in
Mhm.
just, like, the exploration of your creative energy.
Yeah.
Right? And the trusting in that flow of creative expression, without, because, like, the masculine idea, it's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna give to this person, I need to know what I'm gonna get in return. Whereas the feminine expression of that is like, well, how much can I give to this person? Like, it's like as simple as that, right? So that way of living is very frightening for in the society we've come to know, because we've been taught so otherwise. Like, how could you possibly just keep going without knowing what's going to happen, or knowing the plan, or knowing your schedule, or knowing what you're going to get, or how you're going to be safe? Like, all of those ideas, um it's not that you like dismiss those if they naturally arise, but the more you sink into this expression, it's just not as much, it's just not even gonna be there really. Like, you're gonna feel so at home to be more in that, in yourself, you know?
Mhm.
So, I have a really good write-up I sent to my friend who has this, and I'm gonna send it to you, and it's like, it's pretty long, but it has a lot of like just points about this way of living, and what this type of person would have, and I feel like you'll
Yeah, I would
relate
love
with it.
that. And it's really interesting everything that you're saying about my right you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I definitely feel very much in the flow, but there's like this pull in me that's like kind of really going against each other. And it's like, I want to plan, I want to do all these things. And now I'm at a point in my life where like my body doesn't even give a shit anymore. It's like, you're not going to plan. Like, you want to, but I'm not going to give you like that discipline or that structure to do it. So then I went through like kind of a phase where like I was just not doing anything because like I just needed to kind of reprogram all of that. But still now, like I'm still like kind of learning to just be in that flow. So
Mhm.
it's really interesting that you mentioned that because it's actually just who I am and what I'm supposed
Yeah.
to like and not kind of fight it. And it's interesting to be like that in the society that we are because then it's like um I definitely like don't fit in completely, and I kind of get a like judgment or what I perceive as judgment from others because I'm just so much in the flow and so much in like this kind of like I don't care flow thing that people perceive. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I totally feel that. I mean, the more you're authentic with that, and again comes back to that, just that energy of loving your essence and really appreciating yourself, appreciating all the ways in which you express,
Mhm.
and really coming to a place of trusting in how the natural expression goes. I mean, that's all we're ever really working through.
Yeah.
We're only ever really working through the lack of trust that we've learned to
Mhm.
have about ourselves, and about who we are, and about what we really want. Um and then because the lack of trusting is what also breeds lack of patience, because patience patience gets a bad rap because the synthetic mind, or the man-made structures of the world, are always about bigger, faster, stronger, right? So patience denotes this idea like, well, you're not you got to wait longer to get that bigger, faster, stronger. So
Mhm.
the left brain's like, well, if I can get that, why would I wait? What's the point? I want to get it now, and I'm gonna make it happen. And that's the whole like personal development. Like, we gotta push and make all this shit occur. But true patience is just simply being in alignment with the natural unfolding of your experience. And the natural unfoldment of your experience, we could say, is like your destiny, right?
Yeah.
So if your destiny is set in a certain way, you can't speed it up.
Mhm.
It's impossible. And every time you do try and speed it up, it makes it worse. It makes it more troublesome. It actually starts to potentially disrupt the unfolding of your destiny, right? So patience isn't an option in my view. It has to occur. So what we're experiencing when we're going through the healing, and we're experiencing like the boredom or the frustration, or like, I gotta make things happen, whatever. All what's happening is we're purging out those aspects of ourselves that are telling, are basically, it's like the aspect of the ego that thinks it knows better,
Mhm.
like and part of the ego is not only it's, I mean, the majority of the ego is either the karmic energy we're pulling in from past lives, or the learned, which is still karma, but it's the learned elements from others, the conditioning we've taken in from others.
Mhm.
So, like in my case, I had a father that was very like, you gotta plan, you gotta make shit happen. What are you doing? Like, if you're not doing something, what are you gonna do, or what are you doing?
Yeah.
So that had been ingrained for so long, right? So at any point in which I wasn't doing, or wasn't succeeding, it was like, well, I'm worthless.
Mhm.
right? So working out that program on the deepest layer is what's happening when we're sinking into those periods where, like, you, okay, I'm not going to do anything for a while, or really testing the layers of that patience, because you're just continuing to come back to the true alignment of your path, right?
Yeah.
Which is not in time. That's the funny part. Because the paradox of patience is you end up actually moving at a quantum speed. It's not, it's like it changes the game of time altogether.
Okay.
But um but yeah, it's just, again, it's a reverse understanding, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, you're on it. It's that trusting, but that's, I mean, my life has lived in that way. Like, I have a, remember, structure and needs are important in the physical realm, right? Like, in the sense of, you need a safe home,
Yeah.
like feeling like you can get food if you feel like you need food.
Mhm.
A feeling of like companionship, or people that can be there for you, right? Like, if you just go on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you just look at them, you're like, yeah, those just make sense,
Mhm.
right? So, but what we've gotten construed is the idea of like our wants and desires, and then mix those up with our needs.
Okay.
But that's all conditioning, right? It's all conditioning. It's all like sex pornography culture. It's like restaurant and eating out culture. It's social pressure and success and sporting culture. It's all of those different trendy things in our modern life that we've conditioned ourselves to believe that they're needs.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So when those are uprooted, like in my journey, like that's what fasting is in my journey, right? Renunciate periods or celibacy, minimalism. It's not that I want to live my whole life like that. It's that if I don't know what I actually need, then how could I trust what my desires are saying?
Mhm.
So, so as that continues to reformulate, then you start to see, oh, well, structure is actually really simple. Structure isn't like, well, you need to have your car, you need to have your house, you need to have your RSP ready. Like, that's not structure. Structure is just making sure you have your basic needs met. And as those basic needs are met, with generally comes with a very low amount of money and that kind of thing, then there's a real then opening for true expression, of like what it is the soul actually wants to move into.
Mhm. Okay. I like that. Yeah. Okay. I've been doing a lot of work with my masculine energies with like structure.
Sure.
So this conversation has been very interesting for that. So thank you. And you said something about when you're fasting, it's like you kind of like discover what your needs are. And without that, you wouldn't know what your needs are. Yeah. Can you kind of re say that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the physical level of consumption, um, for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
is driven by the emotional structure, right? It's driven by our emotional energy, and then it's driven by our mental belief structures.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when we're younger, love and food are generally very intertwined, right? So again, we have a human need, which is to be fed, but then that transforms through the conditioning of ancestral lineages, where generation after generation, it seems that the only way to show you love somebody is to feed them.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, like in my experience, say my mom, got really like overly mad about something, and made me feel terrible. I played a part in that, but okay, it made me feel terrible when she got really mad. She would then cook a meal or buy me like McDonald's to make me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So now my understanding of love is way more construed in regards to food. Like, on the basic level of needs, sure. But on the level of like, okay, we're gonna deal with my emotions by feeding me. Well, now I've developed a whole belief structure around food that's about, food is gonna make me feel loved. So when I don't feel loved, I want to go eat,
Okay.
right? So the fasting process is not only a first a detoxification of the physical level, which, okay, if your cravings are coming and you think, oh, to feel nourished, I need this. But most of the time that's going to be parasites, worms, tapeworms, and all of the above.
Mhm.
right? So you have parasites telling you that you need the food, not your soul. Like your soul's not craving the food,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I mean, it's no similar in bodybuilding. It's like when you eat to actually build,
Mhm.
right? Like clean, not for the taste. It's a very different experience. And there is some like helpful principles in there outside of like the overindulgence in protein. But there is some helpful ideas there. But the idea of when we come to the basic element of what does our body actually need to feel nourished versus what are the cravings that were happening. So that cravings are coming on the physical level through imbalanced pH. So if we're overly acidic, overly alkaline, we're going to want the opposite. So that's one side. Parasites, tapeworms, and all of that exists all around in your body. Those are sending messages to your mind saying, I want more bread late at night. I want sugar. I want, like the candida. I want the sugar. I want the yeast. I want, like that's what's messaging. So we have to go through that. So that's moving through that toxicity. Then the organs have to come to a certain healing. So, for instance, like the liver is where the anger is stored, right?
Mhm.
So if you have a lot of anger that you've held in from whatever, um, well, what happens when people are drinking? Usually they get really angry. Well, it's because their liver is getting like completely mangled. And it's like kind of a chicken before the egg thing where someone who's angry will likely drink more, and then that makes them more angry because their liver's
Mhm.
getting damaged, and it's this vicious cycle, right? So we have that. Um, so we can see that working through the organ system is what reveals the emotional energy, where when we're feeling a certain emotion and then we want to go eat a certain food, right? Then that is going to generally attract the exact sensation that we're experiencing already in the organ system.
Okay.
Like we're feeling angry, so we want to go eat something that actually is going to affect our liver to make ourselves more angry. That's generally what the cycle will be,
Mhm.
right? Like feeling angry, want something fatty. For me, it's like chips, crunchy, the feeling of crunch, right? The destruction of that food, the fat of that food going straight to the liver. It's all connected.
Okay.
So the fasting process, basically, when we're not giving anything to these cravings, all the cravings then surface. And that's like a pimple or like like shit coming out of your body, like anything. It's the detoxification coming to the surface and saying, this is what's happening inside your body, and now it's coming out. Now it's
Mhm.
revealing itself, right? So that's happening on the physical level. On the mental level, like your belief structures, where okay, my beliefs around this idea now have to shift because it doesn't shoot anymore. So that's changing. And then that's all sourced from the emotional level and the energetic level,
Mhm.
right? So the fasting process is allowing for all that to come to the surface to heal in conjunction with like the meditation and working the energy through and whatever other practices we need,
Yeah.
because it's all helpful. But it's bringing to the surface all of what's really not you, essentially, so
Mhm.
that you can really start to tune into like who you actually are, right? And what are you beyond these stuck emotions, rigid belief structures, and toxicity buildup in your physical body? Like
Mhm.
who are you without these things,
Yeah.
right? Like what do you really crave without these things? Do you even crave anything without these things?
Mhm.
Because in essence, a craving is a response to find relief. So if you don't have anything to relieve yourself, then what could you really be craving? And so that's kind of all what's happening when you're moving through the fasting or meditation process. It's both one and the same. That's why they work in conjunction,
Yeah.
because meditation, you're creating space to see all the beliefs and emotions, and then the fasting, you're pretty much doing the same thing. You're just going at it in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. And then when it says this signature slash goal, does that mean that every time that I want to be invited or that I am invited, that I need to set goals or like use my signature?
No, signature is it's because for you, the as a projector, because you can see things so easily, when people invite you, they're inviting you for that seeing, because they don't have it. So what you bring to people and what you bring to organizations or projects or whatever is the possibility for like really really high levels of success. right? So you're going to experience the feeling of being recognized. You're going to feel appreciated. You know, you're going to feel like, okay, like I, it's also like this sense of confidence. You know, like when you're feeling like someone's really wanting to hear from you, you're experiencing this confidence, and you feel like this like success energy. It's just exuberating from you.
Hmm.
It may not be the success that you typically come to know, you know. I mean, I see a lot of projectors becoming like very materially successful if they're in alignment. Um, but that success is what you bring because you're seeing things that nobody else can see.
Okay.
So it's not that you have to be necessarily setting goals. For you, it's actually even better when you're not necessarily so specific on exactly what you want to create or manifest. It's more about what is the feeling that you want to experience.
Oh, okay.
That has to do with one of your right arrows. Right. So like if you had it left, some people have it left. So they're going to be better suited to have like vision boards and like specific goals and very like laid out ideas of what they want to manifest. But
Hmm.
for us, that's the only right arrow I have too. And it's all about like it's just the feeling. It's just the feeling, right? It's literally like how I got this desk, the perfect example. All I knew is that I needed like this like perfect desk that I could feel like my creative spirit like come back because it's just like going through a renewal. And I'm like, but then I'm like, oh well, I know what desk I want. I want it white. I want it like this. I want it like so. I'm like looking for it and all that. But I'm like, wait a minute, like I don't actually think this is the right way. And then literally as soon as I did that, next day, then I find this desk. It's like perfect.
Huh. And just by thinking what the feeling that you want to experience.
Yeah, thinking and experiencing and embodying it. You know, because like kind of like what we talked about before, to explore thoughts is helpful. Like to attain a certain level of like enlightenment, it's actually through thinking that we do that because you're refining your thinking process because all thoughts carry an energetic signature to them. Thoughts and emotions aren't separate, it's like it's not like we think and then we feel. It's like they happen pretty much at the same time,
Hmm.
right? So as we increase the quality of the thought process of, okay, I'm in a creative space. I'm devoted to this creative energy. I feel this creative energy when I'm writing, even without a desk, and I just have the computer on my lap. I still feel this. It's like I'm embodying the energy of what I know I am and what I know I'm continuing to become. So then that energy then manifests and reflects exactly that in the form of whatever, desires or manifestations that you will require to
Mm,
continue to expand that feeling.
okay. Wow. Okay. I'm just processing. I don't have
I
much to
know.
say
I know.
other
It's
than
great.
okay. About the aura,
Hmm.
um, to like attract people with my aura, I just need to like do my thing, like just exercise, bask in how much I love myself, like you mentioned during meditation, and yeah, that's pretty much that.
Yeah, that and I would invite you to really explore the relationships that you've had, um, in whatever way that arises in a meditation or a journaling process. I have a specific method of which you can use with that, but you don't even need to do that. It's like exploring the relationships that you've explored already, the relationships that you have now, um, in not necessarily an analytical way, but in a way where you can really feel into them. Right? So what I mean by that, it's like for us to really know in regards to relationship, like what's correct from us and what's not, we really have to be honest with how we feel towards the relationships we've had and the relationships that we currently have.
Mm,
Right? So because if we don't do that, then what tends to occur is that we experience a lot of like habitual ways of experiencing relationships.
yeah.
Right? Where like I'll give you an example. It wasn't too long ago I was in another part of town that I'm not usually there. And I have a friend who lives around there. Um, and I was there, and it was like this natural response, like, oh, well, you should just tell him you're there and you guys can like hang out, whatever. And like, of course, that could have happened and that could have been normal. But when I really felt into like my energy and what I was really feeling,
Yeah.
and maybe what I was picking up telepathically from him in that moment that I felt like it maybe wasn't the right moment to be hanging out or exploring or whatever. I really felt into it. And I was like, okay, well, I feel fine to just be alone today and just go into that area and then leave and do what I need to do, right? So it's really about knowing, because when you know yourself and you know like the value that you have with yourself of your own time, like the time you give to yourself, the time, the energy that you put into certain things, like when you really start to experience an awareness of the value of that, we become more cognizant of who we want to spend our time with, the types of people we want in our life. Do I really want to just attract this type of person or this person just to feel better about myself or to feel like to fill this void or this, or is it an authentic, does is there an authentic movement of energy there,
Mhm.
you see? So if we haven't really explored the entirety of the processing of the previous relationships we've had, or even the present relationships we have now, and coming to like a deepened appreciation of the lessons that come with that, then that's where the mind can get into the whole like, yeah, well, who do I attract next, or who's meant to come, like that type of thing.
Okay.
When again, like again, coming back to that, to the way in which you're most suited to attract things, or manifest things, it's coming from that place of not necessarily needing to know what it's going to look like or who it's going to be or whatever. More so, what is the feeling,
What
right?
yeah.
What is the feeling? What are the qualities? What are the principles that this person or this type of relationship are going to exemplify?
Mhm.
And at times that's why we're alone, because that's really the core purpose why we're alone, is to get to know ourselves better and get to know what is truly desirable in a relationship, if a relationship is even desired, no matter like whatever type of relationship it would be.
Yeah. Okay. And what about psychedelics? Is that
Yeah. It's a funny topic. I mean, it's just I've had such an intense experience with it that I felt like for a part of my journey with sharing, especially over the past couple years, people may have at times it may have can't come across as like just denouncing it or like just don't touch it, that kind of thing. And I've balanced out a lot, and even as I share right now, like how I feel towards them. I mean, it's pretty neutral. I know that I personally, I don't like the term never, but I couldn't see myself exploring anything at all any longer. Mainly because it's mainly because of where I feel I'm at. Like I feel
yeah.
so okay, with myself and things, but it's also I've gotten here because of other tools though, right? I've gotten here because of specific practices and meditations and even just, going with human design and these things that in my experience brought such an efficient process of my own progression, and I feel that that would be the same for most other people. We have to remember that everything vibrates on a certain frequency, right? So a certain plant vibrates on a certain frequency that at a certain point may elevate you, right? Where you may be in some sort of lower energy, that plant is actually going to elevate you because that frequency is vibrating a certain place. But
Mhm.
then as you start to get there on your own without the plant, or through the breath, through meditation, through authentic shadow work, with your own contemplations and journaling and all the methods that we've come to know, then you may start elevating beyond the frequency of the plant. So then when you start using the plant, it actually is going to start bringing you down in a certain sense. If we look at it in a linear, it's not always like that, but it it starts to bring a whole new level of the experience, right? So that's one thing. Now, in the new age, psychedelics has been really hyped up, obviously,
Yeah.
and I feel it's been hyped up because the common person is coming into the new age or spirituality without ever having experienced anything. And then they go and explore, say, some psychedelics or weed or something. And all of a sudden, all these things are happening, things that they never thought were possible, never thought would even ever occur. And all of a sudden, their whole world is shifting. So the belief in the mind is, well, it's the plant, it's like it's the psychedelics that they're so good. They give me all these new openings. And for a population that's been deeply depressed and ridden with cancer and disease and a lot of suffering, we can't really blame anyone for perceiving in that way, because it's like, well, look at all the stuff it's bringing, you know?
Yeah.
And that was much of my original journey. And then going into almost like 300 plus ceremonies of all kinds of plants, and having like endless journeys and endless things. You know, I'm writing about some of them in my book. Um, but the reality is, like, they're working on so many layers that for someone to just come in and just go into that, it can be quite dangerous. And in my experience, it was, because on the first level, we have the physical level, where anytime you're using psychedelics, it's pulling energy away from your liver, kidneys, spleen, um, and it's pulling all your energy up into your brain, like the higher faculties for the most part, your nervous system. From an energetic standpoint, on the chakra level, it's opening up, it's not really opening or closing, it's just amplifying the energy in the higher chakras usually, which then can usually diminish or damage the workings of the lower chakras.
Oh.
Which this also connects to a concept that I learned from a pretty advanced system that I work with, which is Keylontic science. And we speak a lot about DNA, like the activation of certain levels of our DNA, right? And so when we're using psychedelics, a lot of times what occurs, and this is what I had intuitively felt for a long time, like I was feeling at a certain point where, okay, I was having all these insights and I was activating all these memories of past lives and abilities and extrasensory perceptions. It was mind blowing. But then what I felt like, it was like every time I came back down, it was like too much to integrate. Like I couldn't integrate all that. It was like, what am I gonna do with all this? I could spend years on just one trip, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and so then inevitably you start losing the memory of those insights, and they kind of just dissolve. And it's almost like nothing was even there. But what's actually happening on a DNA level, at least what I've come to learn, and I feel is intuitively correct, is something we call a DNA compaction, which is, it's pretty much like if you put too much weight on the foundation of a house or something, and it would just crack.
Mhm.
It would start to break. So that kind of is what happens on the DNA level when higher strands of your DNA are being activated without proper methodical progress from the lower chakras or the lower DNA levels that provide the foundation for these higher energies to open. But the paradox is that when you do that in a natural way, in a methodical way, using many different technologies and meditations and practices, those higher abilities and higher energies will happen anyways. You won't need anything, because you're already building up progressively for that energy to naturally bloom like a flower. You're going to open up, and all the extrasensory perceptions and the insights and the abilities, that will all just naturally come. But it's going to happen in the right time,
Yeah.
right? It's going to happen like when you can correctly manage it, right? So with that said, is it like the absolute end of the world if someone has a couple experiences and things? Maybe not, but when we're speaking of like these layers of openings, we're also speaking of higher energetic layers that we're not normally consciously aware of. And in a universe and a planet that has been dealing with a lot of warfare, spiritual warfare, for a very long time,
Mhm.
we're dealing with all kinds of beings and races and energies and all kinds of things, spirits, demons, angels, all of it, that interact on these layers of our consciousness that in a human body, when we're at our normal level of consciousness, we don't generally have an awareness of until we activate authentically those levels. So I had those experiences where I was getting possessed or having channeling experiences, or all these things that in many ways are glamorized within the new age, that I view to be highly dangerous, and not recommended. Like I would never recommend anyone to channel anything. Even dealing with being, like calling on beings and stuff for like protection, or it's like, well, do you really know this being, or you just because you read it about it, or something like that?
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, we wouldn't do that in our normal life, interact with some person that we don't know. Like, of course we have to feel a resonance, and I can't be the one to tell you or anyone what that resonance is with certain beings. But at least from my 10 years of experience on this path, like exploring it, that's the last thing I want to be doing, is inviting a bunch of beings in, or, channeling things where things are taking over your body, which is highly damaging to your anatomy. These are all things that are not commonly talked about in the new age culture, but
yeah.
I don't know. And it's not popular because it's not, it's like it's just a fun thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, everyone has to explore this. I mean, I'm saying this after 300 of them. So like, of course I went very extreme.
Mhm.
So some people, may not go extreme and they may not face the challenges that I did with it. But that's not to say that that can happen in just one experience,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So it's just important to remind ourselves. And I feel like there is a balance to some degree, like, um, because we have to remember this is a pretty far off topic, but it's still relevant. We do exist a part of lineages of beings that go on millions and millions, if not billions of years within the universe. So each of those race lines and different forms of expression, we call different races or forms of beings that we may have a connection to, may actually benefit from certain things that other race lines wouldn't, because it's a part of it's a part of their makeup, it's a part of where they've come from. So like one thing that again is a pretty far off topic, but it's something that I feel is absolutely very real, is that a lot of the plants, in specific, let's say marijuana, actually comes from Nibiru, which is the 13th planet. And Nibiru is, or the 12th planet, sorry, and Nibiru is the planet of the Anunnaki beings.
Mhm.
So Nibiru is like one of the controlling factions, or the Anunnaki are one of the controlling factions of this planet. So there's a lot of Anunnaki beings, and there's people that may actually have parts of their lineage connected to that may benefit in some form by using the tool, but more as a form of letting it go, because they have to come back to an original aspect of themselves. Um, so we all have different histories and karma that will make us more predisposed to certain things. But and then some other people may, I've talked to people that I view to be highly advanced in like psychic powers and all that, that never touch the plant, you know?
Mhm.
So it's so different. But all I know is that it certainly opens up for a bunch of different risks, like that I mentioned, on the physical level, energetic, emotional, and higher consciousness levels.
Yeah.
That, in my view, it's just not necessary, like to put ourselves through,
Mhm.
some of those challenges. And also with that, there's things like microdosing, and then also using it in a form of not psychoactive, right? Like CBD oil, or THC oil for like ailments and stuff. And I've seen really beautiful benefits with that. It's not my first recommendation, but I still feel like it's a powerful thing.
Mhm.
And one thing that I'm adding in my book, which maybe the last thing I touched on, is it, it was common on my path. I had some pretty like OG teachers on my path, like old like gurus, and like, people that are generally older, a bit older generation,
Mhm.
that in my view were, some of the most like high level beings that I came in contact with on my journey. The common theme behind all of them was all of them recommended not using the tools. Some of them wouldn't even work with me if I was using the tool, like psychedelics,
Mhm.
right? So that was like pretty eye opening. And then what reiterated that was two things. There was the show on Netflix about ayahuasca. I forget, it's this new series,
Yeah.
and there was a guy speaking about a topic that I had knew but I hadn't explored much. But it was basically the topic that in the old traditions of ayahuasca, for instance, it was only the shamans who took ayahuasca. It wasn't the group, because the ayahuasca shaman would take it and would open up to the songs that he had to sing to support in the healing of the group or the individual.
Mm.
That was the way it used to be done. But now, because they're poor and there's money and all that, it's really changed, right? And then the other thing is what I posted about the weed thing, right? Where when you smoke, you turn into bong water, which is hilarious, but it's so true. Um, but yeah, but it's the same thing, like I've heard some really high level elder Rastafarians who you think like, well, Rastas must be smoking,
Mhm.
but these are like the true master elder Rastafarians who are all juicing and doing the raw diets and all that, and they don't recommend smoking it. They only recommend like juicing it, or actually eating it.
Mm.
So at least marijuana, when it comes to marijuana, right? Um, so yeah, so that's like my long-winded Gemini answer of the psychedelic question, but I wanted to like cover every angle because yeah, it's quite important.
You mentioned a few things that especially like the new age things of like channeling and stuff. I've never heard that that's not something you should do. And it's funny because I actually just bought a book to kind of like learn more about it to start channeling. So it's different perceptions.
Well,
Interesting to know.
there's two different forms of that exploration. There's channeling, and
Hmm.
then there's data streaming. We can call it that. I mean, people call it different terms, but it's called data streaming. So, for instance, this is how I experience data streaming. I'll literally feel like a file download almost. Like you would download a file or upload a file onto the internet or whatever. I'll literally feel like almost like a file download on a certain topic. I'll literally like almost see the title. And it literally, for me, what I experience it as is a higher aspect of my anatomy or my template, like you could call it the higher self or whatever, is giving me this information. So I take that template and I translate it and I write it down or I speak it.
Hmm.
That's how I experience these pockets of information. It's kind of like what we did today. You give me a question or a topic, and then I download it. Now some of it's coming from my body's recollection and memory, but there are specific times where I feel like there's just this transmission or download, and then boom, I translate it and it's there. But that's coming from, as much as I know and the work that I've done, it's coming from an aspect of my own template and my own higher self, which we could say is connected to the all, and everything's connected to the all. But there's a very intimate, personal relationship with that, where I'm not losing consciousness in any way. Nothing is coming in my body or taking me over. I'm just moving with that,
Okay.
right? So that's important. Channeling is where there's an invitation or there's a forced entry, which is actually possession, of a being coming into the body and taking over the template and then speaking through the body, right?
Mm.
So, okay, I'm not going to say that every channeling is malevolent, like a negative orientation, but what I will say is that all the trend of what I've seen from channelers who've done it for a long period of time is they end up with really challenging health issues later down the road, because the energy they're taking in is not their own and is not correct for their template, and it's overpowering their template,
Mhm.
and that's when inevitably they face a lot of challenges because they've damaged their DNA, in a pretty profound way, right?
Yeah.
So that's the core difference. Now, even like calling in a being and conversing or interacting with that being, that can be a form of like channeling, but it's safer, we could say, because you're not losing consciousness and there's more of a, it's like a person to person communication,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I mean, the core of it is like, I could say these things, but people are never gonna believe it until they experience the bliss of themselves. Because when you feel the bliss of yourself, you're not gonna want anything else in you. You know,
Mhm.
you're not gonna want to eat certain food. You're not gonna want to have that type of conversation. You're not gonna want to do all these things because you feel what you feel like, which is the loving compassion of God source, right? So you're not gonna want to have channel like that kind of stuff, right? But until that's consistent, that's where those desires I found in myself when I was doing all that, that's where it came from,
Hmm.
right? Or with psychedelics, it was just forced, where I'd have a being like literally come in me, and I'm like now speaking like it, and I'm like, okay, well, this is fun because I never experienced it before, but I didn't know if it was good or if it was good right for me, or you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh, okay, I guess you're here now.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And this is coming like it's come from my experience, but it's coming from beings that I really respect, and
Mhm.
people that I really trust in, and yeah, they've shared some powerful things, and it just reiterated what I had observed from seeing other channelers and things over time. That yeah, a lot of times say really nice things. And sure, I can be thankful of that. Like, wow, that's such a beautiful teaching. But do I want to be channeling that stuff? No. Like, I don't
Right.
want that. I don't want no being coming in me. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So
Yeah.
that's kind of what it is. It's not saying like what they're saying is not correct. But we have to question like, well, why are they doing that? Because in my understanding of higher beings in the universe, the most benevolent ones are going to stay the most out of your life. you know.
Okay.
They're going to stay the most, they're going to help you, protect you, whatever, in ways they feel are correct, but they're not going to break the laws of free will, or they're not going to get involved with you in too much of an intrusive way.
Mm,
And that's my litmus test anytime, if I feel like I don't have beings come to me usually unannounced anymore, but if it happens, that's my litmus test, right?
okay.
So yeah.
That's interesting. Because I've been really interested in connecting with my guides.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to know that information.
Well, one thing that I learned from my friend, I don't, were you on the call with Bavik when I had Bavik on?
No.
So he's a really good friend of mine. He's very to himself. He's not public really with a lot of his stuff, but he's, in my view, one of the most advanced psychics I've come to know. And I, for years, and I still do at times, check in with him. Like, you know, he checks in. He's very clear in his ability to check in with guides. Now it's become more of a learning. He's a teacher to me, because he's taught me how to check in on my own. But what I've learned from him, and what I've learned within my own journey, is that our guides are just emanations of our own consciousness. So they're aspects of our higher self that are just taking up different forms, but they're all a part of our same kind of soul family, if you will, or
Mhm.
incarnate self. Because at the different layers of our higher self, oversoul, avatar self, and rishi self, there's basically, it comes in multiples of 12 pretty much, of aspects of us that are incarnate in different ways, different places in the universe. But it's like, that's our true soul family. It's basically us separated into different subforms of higher versions of us.
Mhm.
So it's kind of complex, but that's as simple as I'll make it for now. So when we speak to the idea of guides, we're basically connecting to these aspects of ourselves, or that would be at least the most refined process of that, right? So that is really not so much as far as just like coming to tune into our intuition, really starting to feel into the different ways in which we receive messaging, and whether certain messaging may feel intrusive, or whether it may feel like correct, like that feels right, you know. And a lot of it is kind of like a trial and error process. That's how it's been for me. Like, you know, asking a question, feeling into what I truly feel, like really being honest with myself. And then I could say like, oh, I'm asking my guides, but really I'm just asking myself, right?
Okay.
So it still works the same, but it's just, it's that process of listening, and then acting on the thing, you know. And then you'll see like what the results are, and you'll kind of see like, oh, but I was kind of feeling like this was actually it, and I didn't listen, you
Mhm.
know. So as you can kind of start to like do that, almost like in your own self study, then you start to refine that, the listening, where you're like, okay, I remember that from last time, it kind of felt like that, but it was in the distance, so I can tune to that more next time. And then you keep going with that, and it keeps to, you know, deepen. And you know, it may be different for you. You may get visions or more auditory, right? Like sometimes I'll get direct auditory, like from a higher aspect of self that will be like very clear, you know. So as we get clear, that connection becomes clear, and then we have more of a line of communication, um, that'll be there, you know.
Okay. Cool.